economy very much in focus this morning with a very disappointing small business survey, as well as those trade deficit numbers coming in. And who better to talk us through this but Jan Hatzius, Chief U.S. Economist for Goldman. Jan, good morning. And what do you think of these small business numbers? Does it seriously derail the concept of economic recovery?
Good morning, Steve. I think that's it's not that big a deal. It is clearly a weaker number. It illustrates, I think, the continuing gap between large firms that sort of dominate the ISM survey that was very strong in March, and really not much change in the small business sector. I wouldn't say it derails the economic recovery. I do think the recent numbers on balance have been on the encouraging side, but this is a somewhat dissonant sort of note.
But Jan, how is it possible that we could have a true and lasting economic recovery in this country if we don't have small business on board, which after all does half of all the hiring?
So I think we can have a lasting economic recovery in the sense that the economy grows through 2010. We expect it to grow, but we don't expect it to grow that quickly. Partly because we're taking away some of the temporary factors, the inventory cycle, which helped a lot, the fiscal stimulus. And underneath, things are improving, and I think the underlying trend in the business sector, and probably also in the small business sector, is towards improvement, but it's a fairly slow process.
Jan, the better economic numbers last week, we had retail sales suggesting maybe the rumors of the consumer's death are greatly exaggerated. Some economists marked up their GDP forecast. What about you?
We are, we definitely have some upside risk to the near-term numbers. First quarter is probably going to be pretty soft, but the second quarter looks like it's going to come in pretty good. We'll want to see the government retail sales report that comes out tomorrow morning. The store reports are always a little tricky in March and April with the shifting timing of Easter, so we want to see how much of an effect that actually had. The government retail sales report is seasonally adjusted, and therefore you get a better sense there.
Jan, I read in your report that the consumer has continued to sort of surprise you guys, saving a little bit less than you expected, but you have a really interesting reason for that. Maybe you could explain it. So
basically, if you look at the personal saving rate, it's still very low. And if you look at personal saving, you would conclude that consumer hasn't really retrenched by all that much. But that's basically because the personal saving rate does not include housing expenditures. And so it's somewhat at odds with how most people probably think about spending. They probably include housing expenditures. If you do include housing expenditures, you've actually seen a pretty sizable retrenchment, and a retrenchment that's actually quite in line with what you would have expected given the decline in housing and other wealth.
Jan, let's go back and talk about how solid this recovery is. What challenges do you see ahead for the economy that could really derail the recovery?
So in terms of things that are going to keep the recovery slow, I think it's mainly the fact that we're losing the fiscal stimulus, at least the impact of the fiscal stimulus on growth. We're losing that in the second half of this year, and the inventory cycle is coming off. I think that's going to mean relatively slow growth rates through 2010. What could actually derail things? I think you'd probably have to say another, a new shock in the markets. Much worse than expected. Much worse than expected house price performance.
So you see it as pretty solid. Fed Chairman Ben Bernanke testifying tomorrow on the economic outlook. What do you expect to hear from him, and when do you see the turn in the Federal Reserve tightening cycle? So
we don't expect to hear anything very different from the speeches that we heard last week, so I think he's going to say, things are improving, things are stabilizing. But inflation is still very low. It's probably still falling, at least at the moment, and the turn in the funds rate is still a long ways off. My own view is that we're not going to get a hike in 2010, and at this point, I think even a hike in 2011 has less than 50% probability. He's not going to go anywhere near as far as indicating that, but I do think they think it's still quite a ways off.